At his engagement gala, Judge Silas Whittaker thought he was showing off his prize, Slave Girl's perfect pitch to impress the wealthy guests, but when little Mary began to hum, every head in the room turned away from his icy bride-to-be. What Silas didn't know was that this 10-year-old child possessed a dangerous gift. She could spot forged legal documents better than trained lawyers, and the overseer Pike had been counting on her silence. But when Mary whispered that the county seal was wrong, the wrong wax, the wrong markings, she set in motion a chain of events that would expose a conspiracy reaching into the highest levels of society. The same grandmother who had sewn freedom papers into a family quilt had taught this child to read the language of power itself. Now Pike was scrambling to silence her before she could testify, but he had no idea that Mary's voice would soon have an entire town singing for justice. If you're watching this incredible true story unfold, hit subscribe and tell me what city you're watching from, because what happened next will restore your faith in the power of truth. Daybreak caught the pewter cups singing. Mary set each one at its own distance from the boiling kettle, listening for the note. The A cup sat closest, she could tell by the pitch that rose when steam touched its rim. The others fell in line, B flat, C, D, a kitchen scale made of sound. "Child's got the ear of heaven," Ephraim said from the doorway. The old stable hand stepped careful on the wide pine boards, his boots still wet with morning dew. Kettle's singing. "A true, ain't it?" "Yes, sir." Mary's hands moved quick and light, aligning the cups just so. "Judge Silas, he wants me to test the piano tonight." "Courthouse Gala," Ephraim hummed low, the same chapel tune Mary's mother used to sing, the one that settled the horses when thunder rolled. The melody wound through the kitchen like morning mist, catching on the copper pots and the clean-swept hearth. Cook Hester pushed through the pantry door, flour on her brown arms up to the elbows. "That child's fixing to charm the whole county tonight. Judge has been coughing hard since the fever broke. Needs her tune to steady his breath." Mary touched the blue ribbon at her wrist, worn cotton, soft as a whisper. Mother's ribbon, mother's song. The only things Pike couldn't take when he tallied the estate. Boots on the back stairs, heavy ones. Judge Silas Whittaker came down slow, one hand on the rail, the other pressed to his chest. His face showed grey around the eyes, but he straightened when he saw the cups lined up perfect. "Let me hear it, little one." Mary hummed the chapel note, low and steady. The kettle joined her, and the cups rang their harmony. Even the loose floorboard by the stove seemed to settle into tune. Judge Silas breathed deep, for the first time since dawn. The tight lines around his mouth eased. He pulled a chair to the table and sat heavy. "Pike's been asking after you and your brother," he said. "New overseer thinks he can balance books by selling what ain't his to sell. Papers say we belong to the estate, sir." Mary kept her eyes on the cups. "Till your debt's clear. Papers can lie." His voice carried something that made Ephraim look up sharp. "Tonight, you stay close. Tune that piano like you tune these cups. Make them remember what music sounds like when it's pure." Hester set a bowl of cornmeal mush before him. He ate slow, each spoonful timed to Mary's quiet humming. When the coughing fit started deep and rattling, she shifted her tune to match his labored breathing. "Slow it down, steady it out. Let the music carry what the lungs couldn't hold." "Ain't natural, how that child can time a man's breath to song," Hester murmured. But Silas's chest rose and fell easier now. Color crept back to his cheeks. "At sundown we go to town," he said when the fit passed. "Keep your ribbon on, little one. Tonight they need to see what they're fixing to lose." The wagon wheels found every rut between plantation and town. Mary sat small between Judge Silas and Ephraim, her feet not quite touching the buckboard floor. The blue ribbon caught the last light, bright against her dark skin. Ephraim kept the pass papers tucked inside his vest, close to his heart. 3 slaves traveling after dusk needed clean documentation. The patrol dogs could smell trouble from a mile off. "Storm's building," Silas pointed to the shelf cloud, hanging low over the river. "Might have flooding by morning," thunder muttered in the distance. The horses flicked their ears but kept steady. Ephraim had trained them well, no bolting when the weather turned. Hoofbeats behind them, coming fast. Pike rode up on the black gelding, reins tight in his gloved hands. The overseer's face showed sharp angles in the twilight nose like a blade, eyes set deep and narrow. He pulled alongside the wagon without slowing. "Judge Whittaker, taking your songbird to market?" Silas's jaw tightened. Taking her to tune a piano. Nothing more. Might be the last time. Pike's grin split mean. Got papers say that girl and her brother are debt security. Might need to collect come morning. From the patrol road, dogs started barking. Deep voices, hunting voices. Miri felt the sound in her chest harsh and wild and wrong. Without thinking, she hummed a single note. Soft, true, the way Mother used to calm the horses. The barking stopped. Pike's horse shied sideways, ears twitching toward the sound. Even the wind seemed to pause. What was that? Pike's voice came sharp. Music, Silas said. Something you wouldn't understand. Thunder rolled closer now. The storm shelf spread wider, swallowing stars. Show your pass at the ferry and keep your eyes down, Ephraim said quietly, angling the lantern forward like a signal. The light swung steady as a heartbeat. Pike spurred his horse and rode ahead, but not before Miri caught the look he threw back, like a man marking property for collection. River fog wound thick around the ferry landing. The crossing rope stretched taut between cypress posts, and the flat-bottomed boat knocked gentle against the pilings. Water lapped dark and steady, carrying the scent of mud and fish and something else, rain, still miles upstream but coming shore. The boatman held out his hand for papers before they could step aboard. His lantern threw wavering light on the pass, checking the wax seal and the county clerk's signature. Two patrollers slouched against the ferry post, rifles loose in their hands. One sniffed the air like a hound checking scent. Judge Whitaker, the boatman nodded respect. Taking the girl to town? Courthouse Gala. She's tuning the piano. The patroller straightened. Awful late for slaves to be crossing. Miri stared at the pass in the boatman's hands. The wax seal caught the lantern light deep red, pressed with the county crest. 3 oak leaves and a scroll. She'd seen that mark 100 times on official papers. County seal's right, she said quiet to Ephraim. Wax color too, red for evening passage, blue for morning trade. The boatman heard. His eyebrows went up. Child knows her seals. Knows more than that, Silas said, mind sharp as her pitch. The patroller with the rifle stepped closer. Since when do slaves read county marks? Since they got eyes to see, Ephraim said steady. Pass is clean, seals proper. You got cause to hold us? Thunder rolled again, closer now. The first fat raindrops hit the dock planks. Get aboard, the boatman said, handing back the pass. Storm's coming fast. They climbed onto the ferry, wagon wheels creaking on the wet boards. The river stretched wide and black before them, and across the water, lamplight marked the courthouse square. Across the water, the courthouse piano waits, Silas whispered as the ferry pole knocked against the hull. His voice carried something Miri couldn't name, hope, maybe, or fear dressed up like hope. The boat swayed as Ephraim guided the horses aboard. Miri touched her ribbon and hummed soft under her breath, the chapel tune that always settled nerves and storms alike. The courthouse blazed with lamplight. Windows golden squares in the brick walls, and inside, the sound of voices and laughter, and somewhere beneath it all, a piano waiting to be tuned. Miri walked between Judge Silas and Ephraim, her bare feet quiet on the polished floors. The gala was in full swing, men in dark coats, ladies with feathers in their hair, crystal glasses that sang when they touched. At the far end of the room, a piano stood open, black wood gleaming, ivory keys neat as corn teeth, and beside it, like a cold star, Evangeline Harrow, in a dress the color of winter sky, Silas's bride-to-be, the woman who would clear his debts and take his name and make the plantation profitable again. "There's my songbird," Silas said, loud enough for the nearest guests to hear. "Come, tune us something sweet." Conversation slowed as they crossed the room. Heads turned to follow the small figure in patched cotton and the blue ribbon that caught the lamplight. Miri sat on the piano bench and touched middle C. The note rang true but lonesome. She hummed the chapel tune, the one Ephraim sang in the kitchen, the one Mother used for lullabies. Perfect pitch, pure as morning mist. The room went still. Not the way a room quiets when someone important speaks. This was deeper, like the moment before dawn when even the birds hold their breath. Every voice stopped. Every glass paused halfway to lips. No one looked at his bride. Evangeline's cheeks flushed hot. Her fingers gripped the fan till the ivory ribs creaked. "Eyes on me," she hissed when Silas moved to stand beside the piano. and eyes off that girl. But the room stayed, turned toward the music, toward the child whose voice made the crystals sing harmony, and the lamplight seem warmer. Pike slipped in from the side door, moving quiet as smoke toward the clerk's desk where official papers lay stacked and waiting for morning business. "Mr. Pike has something to show us." Evangeline's voice cut sharp through the music. The overseer stepped forward, a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. Behind him came the deputy clerk's apprentice, a thin young man with ink-stained fingers who kept glancing toward the door like he wanted to run. "Judge Whittaker." Pike's smile showed teeth. "Got a document here you might find interesting." He spread a paper on the piano lid. Heavy stock, official seal in red wax, signatures dark and bold across the bottom. "Debt note," Pike announced to the room. "Signed and witnessed. Says the girl and her brother are collateral for estate obligations. Time to collect." Silas leaned over the paper, his face going pale. "This isn't what I signed. I agreed to temporary custody, nothing more." "Paper says what paper says," Pike replied. "Clerk's seal makes it legal." Miri stared at the wax seal, tilting her head like she was listening for a note just out of tune. The red wax caught the lamplight, and there, pressed deep in the center, the county crest. 3 oak leaves and a scroll, but the leaves looked wrong somehow, the middle one too broad, and the scroll had little marks at the edges, tiny lines that shouldn't be there. "Sir," she said quiet to the apprentice, "that seal got serifs on the scroll?" The young man blinked. "Ma'am? Little lines, on the letter parts. This county don't use serif marks, clean cuts only." The apprentice looked closer. His face went white. That's not our seal." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Pike's smile tightened. "Child's mistaken," he said quick. "Clerk himself pressed that wax. Clerk's been sick 3 days. The apprentice whispered. "Hasn't pressed any seals since Tuesday." The murmurs grew louder. Doubt crept into voices. Papers rustled as people pushed closer to see. "Furthermore," Pike said, raising his voice, "the seal's color is wrong too. Should be blue for evening documents. This red wax is from a different batch entirely." Evangeline's fan snapped shut. "Enough. The paper stands as written." But the damage was done. In a room full of lawyers and judges and men who knew their way around legal documents, doubt spread like smoke. Who witnessed this signature? Someone called from the back. "And where's the original registry entry?" Pike gathered the paper, but his hands shook slight. "All in order. Clerk will confirm tomorrow." "If the clerk's well enough to speak," the apprentice said. Thunder crashed overhead, rattling the courthouse windows. The storm had arrived. "I'll not have my engagement overshadowed by slave paper arguments." Evangeline stepped to the center of the room, her winter blue dress catching every eye. "Mr. Pike, you'll sort this matter privately. Tonight is for celebration." But the celebration had turned. Conversations buzzed with legal theories and questions about seals and witnesses. The piano sat forgotten, its lid still scattered with suspicious documents. Silas pulled Miri aside, his voice low. "That was well seen, little one, but Pike won't forget. Neither will Miss Evangeline." "Paper felt wrong," Miri said, "like a song in the wrong key. Trust that feeling." He pressed a folded bill into her palm. "If something happens tonight, if Pike tries to take you, run for the church basement. Preacher Cole keeps spare quilts there. Find the one with the tight binding." Before Miri could ask what that meant, Pike appeared at Silas's elbow. "A word, Judge." They moved to the corner where the law books stood in neat rows. Pike's voice carried despite his effort to whisper. "Miss Evangeline's family holds your note. Full payment due come spring, or they take the plantation. Every acre, every building, every slave." Silas's face went grey. The terms were negotiable. Were. Past tense. Pike smiled, cold. "Now the lady wants security. Sign over temporary custody of the girl and her brother, or face foreclosure before the cotton plants. And if I refuse, then you'll be explaining to your creditors why you chose a slave child over solvency." Thunder shook the building again. Through the windows, Miri could see trees bending in the wind. The storm that had been threatening all evening was finally showing its teeth. "I need time to consider," Silas said. "You have until midnight." Pike checked his pocket watch. "After that, my papers stand as written forgery, questions and all." He walked away, leaving Silas standing pale by the law books. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the courthouse gala continued, but the music felt hollow now. Even the piano seemed out of tune. Mary touched her blue ribbon and hummed soft, not the chapel song this time, but something else, something that sounded like a storm building. Something that sounded like change coming whether folks wanted it or not. The clock on the mantel chimed 11, 1 hour until midnight, 1 hour until Pike's deadline came due. The doctor's surgery occupied a narrow room behind the courthouse, lined with bottles that caught lamplight like trapped amber. Latin labels in careful script marked each jar: Digitalis, Laudanum, Mercury. The air smelled of carbolic and something bitter that made Mary's nose wrinkle. Judge Silas collapsed into the wooden chair, his breathing sharp and rattling. The stress of Pike's ultimatum had triggered another coughing fit, this one worse than the morning episode. "Can't breathe right," he gasped between spasms. Dr. Hart set his medical bag on the scarred table and reached for a brown bottle. "Laudanum will ease it." Mary stepped closer to the shelves, studying the Latin words. Mother had taught her letters before the fever took her not reading proper, but enough to recognize shapes and sounds. Lobelia inflata. She read aloud from a small green bottle. "For the lungs." Dr. Hart turned sharp. "Child can read Latin?" "Some." Mary touched the bottle. "My mother brewed tonic from this. Indian tobacco. Good for tight chest, bad for too much." The doctor's eyebrows climbed. "How much is too much?" 3 drops in warm water. 5 drops, and a man sleeps hard. 10 drops. Mary shrugged. "Don't wake up. Merciful heaven." Dr. Hart looked from the bottle to the girl, to Judge Silas, who was watching with interest despite his labored breathing. "You're certain about the dosage?" Instead of answering, Mary found a clean cup and measured water from the pitcher. 3 drops from the green bottle, stirred with a wooden spoon. The mixture turned pale green, like spring leaves. "Drink slow," she told Silas. "Tastes bitter, but it works true." The judge sipped the mixture, his face puckering at the taste. Within minutes, his breathing eased. The color returned to his cheeks. Dr. Hart stared. "Remarkable, simply remarkable." "Child's got gifts beyond music," Ephraim said from the doorway. He'd been standing watch while they tended Silas. "Always known plants and such. Where did her mother learn these remedies?" the doctor asked. "From her mother," Silas said, his voice clear now. "And her mother before that. Knowledge passes down, generation to generation, like songs do." Thunder crashed again, closer this time. Rain began hitting the windows in wind-driven sheets. "Storm's getting worse," Ephraim observed. "Ferry might not run come morning. Then we find another way across." Silas stood, steady now. "Doctor, I need a favor. If Pike comes asking about the child's whereabouts—" "You never saw her tonight," Dr. Hart nodded, slow. "Medical privilege covers all conversations in this room." "What about the custody papers?" Mary asked. Silas's jaw tightened. "We're going to find another kind of paper, one Pike won't expect." The church basement smelled of old hymns and older wood. Preacher Cole led them down the narrow stairs by lantern light, his shadow dancing on the stone walls. Quilts lay stacked on shelves, wedding quilts, funeral quilts, baptism cloths worked by generations of churchwomen. "What are we looking for?" the preacher asked. "Something with tight binding," Silas said. "Hidden papers, maybe. Documents that might change Pike's calculations." Mary moved along the shelves, touching the folded quilts. Some felt ordinary cotton and wool, stitched with love, but nothing more. Others seemed to hold secrets in their seams. This one. She stopped before a quilt in deep blues and whites, stars scattered across its surface like the night sky. The binding around the edges felt stiff, too thick for ordinary backing. Preacher Cole spread it on the wooden table. By lantern light, the stars seemed to move. "Harrow family quilt," he said. "Evangeline's grandmother made it. Been in the church since the old lady passed." Mary traced the binding with careful fingers. "Something's sewn inside. Paper, feels like. Dangerous to cut it open," Ephraim warned. "Miss Evangeline finds out. She'll have us all whipped. She'll have us sold if we don't," Silas replied. "Cut the binding, child." Careful now. Using the preacher's small sewing knife, Mary loosened the tight stitches. The thread was old but strong, dyed deep blue like midnight. As the binding opened, paper crinkled inside. A folded document, yellow with age. Elegant handwriting in faded brown ink. Silas unfolded it with trembling hands. Last will and testament of Margaret Harrow, Evangeline's grandmother. Read it aloud, Preacher Cole said. To my granddaughter Evangeline, I leave the family quilts and the wisdom sown therein. But to the child Miriam, daughter of my faithful house servant Sarah, I leave freedom for herself and all her issue, upon the occasion of my son's death or my son's debt exceeding the value of his lands. Silence filled the basement. The lantern flickered. Old man Harrow died last spring, Ephraim said slowly. Debt's been piling since, and Evangeline's father holds Silas's note, the preacher added. The debt condition is met. Mary stared at the paper. This makes me free? If it's legal, Silas said. If we can prove its authenticity, if Pike doesn't destroy it first. Thunder shook the church above them. Through the small basement windows, lightning split the sky. Storm's getting worse, Preacher Cole said. Might be flooding by dawn. Then we move fast. Silas folded the document careful. First light, we take this to the probate judge. Let him read the grandmother's intent in open court. And if Pike tries to stop us, Silas touched the paper like it was made of gold. Then we find out if Providence favors legal documents over forged ones. The country chapel sat a mile from town, its white clapboard walls gleaming pale in the stormlight. Evangeline had chosen it for their wedding venue, small, intimate, expensive to reserve. Tonight it offered shelter from Pike's prying eyes. Sella the midwife waited for them inside, her herb satchel open on the altar rail. She'd delivered half the county's babies and laid out most of their dead. Her hands knew healing, and her eyes knew truth. Judge Whitaker. She nodded as they entered, shaking rain from their coats. Childs looking peaked. Mary had gone quiet since finding the hidden document. The weight of potential freedom sat heavy on her small shoulders. Sella, we need you to examine something, Silas said. He spread the grandmother's will on the communion table. Tell us about the paper, the ink, the stitching. The midwife pulled spectacles from her apron and bent close. Her fingers traced the document's edges, testing the paper's thickness. Good stock, she murmured. Cotton rag, not wood pulp. Age is right 20 years, maybe more. Ink's iron gall, made from oak, standard for legal documents. She turned to the quilt, binding they'd cut open. Stitching's old too. Blue thread, indigo dyed, same blue as the quilt stars. This paper was sewn in when the quilt was made, not added later. Can you swear to that in court? Silas asked. I can swear to more than that. Sella's eyes gleamed. I helped Margaret Harrow write this will. Held her hand steady when the palsy shook her fingers, watched her sew it into the quilt binding herself. Mary looked up sharp. You knew about the paper? Knew she wanted to free your mother's line? Knew she put it where Evangeline couldn't find it casual-like? Sella touched the girl's cheek gentle. Your grandmother was a wise woman. She planned for this day. Thunder crashed again, rattling the chapel windows. Through the glass, they could see trees bending nearly horizontal in the wind. River's rising, Ephraim said, squinting through the rain. Ferry'll be underwater by dawn. Then Pike can't bring reinforcements from town, Silas said with satisfaction. We're all trapped here together. Good and bad folks alike, Sella observed. Storm don't choose sides. But as if summoned by her words, hoofbeats sounded through the rain. Multiple riders, coming fast toward the chapel. Pike, Ephraim said. Found us. Silas folded the will quick. Hide this. If something happens to me, get it to the probate judge. Where? Mary asked. Before anyone could answer, the chapel door burst open. Pike stood silhouetted in the doorway, rain streaming from his coat. Behind him came two rough men Mary didn't recognize. Judge Whitaker, Pike called out. Time to settle accounts. This is God's house, Preacher Cole said, stepping between Pike and the communion table. Whatever business you have can wait till morning. Pike's smile showed teeth like a trap. Business can't wait. Got papers say the girl belongs to the Harrow estate. Come to collect what's mine. Yours? Silas stood slowly. Since when do overseers own people? Since Miss Evangeline signed power of attorney. Pike pulled a folded document from his coat. Full authority to act on behalf of the family interests. The paper looked official, heavy stock, bold signatures, red wax seal. But Mary studied the seal with careful eyes. Same wrong serif marks as before. Wax is wrong again, she said quiet. Pike heard her. Child's obsessed with seals. Maybe she needs to learn her place. One of his men stepped forward, hand on his knife. But Ephraim moved between them, his own knife appearing quick and silent. Touch that child. You'll bleed, the old man said, calm. Pike laughed. 3 armed men against an old slave and a sick judge. I like those odds. But Sella had been moving quiet during the confrontation, her herb satchel open, her hands quick and sure. When Pike's attention turned to Ephraim, she flicked powder from a small vial into the chapel's water basin. Gentlemen, she said mild, why don't you all have a drink? Storm's got everyone parched. The sweet scent of valerian root began to fill the air. Sleep powder, mild but effective. Pike's men swayed slightly. Their eyelids grew heavy. What did you? Pike started, then noticed his companions slumping against the pews. Nothing harmful, Sella said. Just a little rest for tired souls. Pike backed toward the door, his eyes wild. This isn't over. Come morning, I'll have the law. I'll have dogs. I'll have thunder crashed louder than cannon fire. Lightning split the sky, and through the chapel windows they could see the river rising fast. Too fast. You'll have water up to your neck if you don't find high ground, Ephraim said. Ferry's gone. Bridge might go too. Pike looked through the rain toward town. Between the chapel and the courthouse, the river spread wide and angry. Damn, he whispered. Language, Preacher Cole said mild. Still God's house. They were all trapped together now, slaves and overseers, judges and preachers, the righteous and the wicked all huddled in the same small chapel while the storm raged outside. Pike's men slept peaceful on the back pews, snoring soft as babies. Pike himself paced the center aisle like a caged animal, glancing between the will hidden in Miri's dress and the rising water outside. How long till the flood peaks? Silas asked Ephraim. Few hours, maybe dawn. The old man watched water creep up the chapel steps. This building's on good foundation, but if the levee breaks... Levee won't hold, Pike said sharp. Built it too low last spring. Water gets much higher. Whole town'll flood. You seem to know a lot about the levee, Sella observed. Pike's jaw tightened. Know about lots of things, including that will you found. The chapel went quiet except for rain on the roof and the distant sound of rushing water. How did you? Silas started. Saw you reading it. Saw the look on your faces. Pike's smile turned cold. Margaret Harrow was a foolish old woman. Should have known better than to interfere with property law. Should have known better than to trust family, Mary said quiet. Pike turned on her. What's that supposed to mean? But Mary was studying the communion table, where drops of water had begun falling through a leak in the roof. Each drop hit with a clear, pure note, like the pewter cups in the kitchen, like the piano keys at the courthouse. Water's finding its way in, she said. Always does, when the foundation shifts. Preacher Cole caught her meaning. Truth has a way of surfacing too, no matter how deep folks try to bury it. Outside, the storm reached its peak. Wind howled through the trees, and lightning lit the flooded landscape like day. The river had become a lake, stretching from chapel to courthouse, and somewhere in that chaos, documents were being sorted, seals were being compared. Questions were being asked about overseer authority and family wills and children who knew too much about county marks. Come morning, Silas said over the storm noise. We'll all have some explaining to do. Pike's hand moved to his coat pocket. Come morning, some folks won't be talking at all. But Ephraim was watching, always watching, and his knife stayed ready. Dawn came grey and dripping, with mist rising off the flooded valley like ghosts of drowned trees. The storm had passed, but its work was done. The river had claimed roads, bridges, and most of the low country between chapel and town. Pike's men woke slow and confused, the sleep powder having worked through their blood. Pike himself had dozed fitful in the front pew, one eye always on the doors. Ferry's gone, Ephraim reported from the chapel window. Bridge too, whole road's under water. How do we get to town? Silas asked. Don't. Pike stood stiff, his coat wrinkled from the long night. Court's postponed, till the water drops. Could be days. But Miri was listening to something else, the sound of water moving, flowing, finding its course, the same way music flowed, following the path that felt right. There's a way, she said. Old mule trail, runs along the ridge, above floodline. Pike's eyes narrowed. How would you know about mule trails? Same way I know about seals and plant medicine. Miri touched her blue ribbon. Mother taught me. Her mother taught her. Knowledge passes down. Preacher Cole studied the flooded landscape. Trails narrow, dangerous in wet weather. More dangerous to stay here, Sella said. Pike's friends will come looking soon as the water drops. Better too. Face the judge while we still can. Trail starts behind the cemetery, Miri continued. Follows the ridge north, then drops down to the courthouse square. Half a mile if you know the way. And if we don't know the way? Silas asked. Miri hummed soft, a different tune than the chapel song. This one had turns and pauses, rises and falls. A melody that mapped itself across the landscape. Song shows the path, she said, like the hymns in the church basement. Singers used to mark safe routes that way. Ephraim's eyes widened with understanding. Underground railroad music. Just music, Miri corrected. But music that remembers. Pike stepped closer, his face hard. Child knows too much. Child knows exactly enough, Sella replied. Question is, do we follow her map or wait for Pike's friends to arrive? Through the chapel windows, they could see smoke rising from the courthouse chimney. Someone was already working in the flooded town, getting ready for whatever business the day might bring. We go, Silas decided, all of us together. Let the judge sort truth from falsehood in open court. Pike's hand moved again to his coat pocket. Some truths are too dangerous to speak. But the will rested safe in Miri's dress, and the hymn road waited beyond the chapel doors. The mule trail cut narrow through wet pine and hanging moss, slick from the night's rain. Miri led the way, humming the root song under her breath, while her bare feet found sure purchase on the muddy path. Behind her came Silas, breathing easier since the lobelia tonic but still careful on the treacherous footing. Ephraim followed, his knife loose in its sheath and his eyes on Pike, who brought up the rear with his two drowsy companions. How much further? Pike called when they'd climbed for half an hour. Song's got 3 verses, Miri replied without turning. We're barely through the first. Preacher Cole and Sella had stayed at the chapel to tend Pike's men and keep the grandmother's will safe. If something happened on the trail, they'd witness what remained. The path curved sharp around a fallen oak, then dropped toward a creek crossing. Water ran high from the storm, but stones offered passage for those who stepped careful. Child first, Ephraim said. Show us how it's done. Miri tested each stone with her toe before committing her weight. The water ran swift and cold, talking to itself in a dozen different voices. She matched her humming to the creek's melody, finding harmony in the chaos. Halfway across, she paused. The song had changed, picked up a new note that didn't belong. Dogs barking in the distance. Patrol, Pike said with satisfaction. Told you they'd come looking. The barking grew louder, coming from the valley below. Multiple dogs, running hard on a scent trail. Silas stumbled on a wet stone, his bad lungs making him unsteady. Can we outrun them? Ephraim shook his head. Not in this terrain. Dogs'll tree us within the hour. But Miri was listening to the patrol sounds, noting the pitch, the rhythm, the way the barks echoed off the valley walls. Like tuning a piano, you had to understand the instrument before you could make it sing right. Dogs are running Cold Trail, she said, following yesterday's scent from the chapel. But we're above them now. Different path entirely. She began humming again, but louder this time, a clear carrying note that wound through the trees like morning mist. The barking stopped. What did you do? Pike demanded. Dogs hear music same as people, Miri said. Confused them. Made them think the scent trail ends where my voice starts. Below in the valley, they could hear the patrol dogs whining, casting about for a lost trail. Their handlers' voices carried frustrated curses. Won't hold them long, Ephraim warned. Miri nodded and pressed forward, the root song flowing stronger now. The path climbed steep through laurel thickets, then leveled out along a ridge that offered glimpses of the flooded town below. The courthouse stood like an island in the muddy water, its brick walls solid and dependable. Smoke rose from multiple chimneys, judges and clerks already at work, despite the early hour. Almost there, Miri said. One more verse to sing. But Pike had been thinking while they climbed, and his thinking had turned dark. Can't let you reach that courthouse, Pike said when they paused at the ridge crest. His hand came out of his coat holding a small pistol single shot, but enough to settle arguments at close range. His companions flanked him, more awake now and ready for trouble. "Mr. Pike," Silas said, careful, "you're making a mistake." Mistake was letting that child find the old woman's papers. Pike kept the gun steady. "Should have burned them the day Margaret Harrow died." "So, you knew about the will all along?" Ephraim asked. "Knew about lots of things. Evangeline's father paid me well to keep family secrets buried." Pike's smile showed no warmth. "Can't have dead grandmothers freeing valuable property." Mary stood still as stone, but her mind was working fast. The root song had 3 verses, past, present, and future. They'd sung their way through past and present, but the future verse held more than directions. It held warnings. "Third verse tells about the drop-off," she said quiet to Silas. Pike heard. "What drop-off?" Instead of answering, Mary began humming the final verse. The melody climbed high, then fell sudden and sharp like the path that waited just around the bend. "Trail narrows here," she said. "Drop steep to the courthouse square. Easy to lose footing if you don't know the way." Pike motioned with the pistol. "Then you'll guide us down safe. One wrong step, and the judge gets a bullet instead of testimony." They moved single file now, Pike behind Silas with the gun pressed to his ribs. The path cut switchbacks down the ridge face, loose stone underfoot, and nothing but air on the downhill side. Mary sang the warning verse louder, her voice carrying across the valley. Below, she could see people moving in the courthouse square, early arrivals for whatever business the day might bring. "Quiet," Pike hissed. "Don't want to attract attention." But attention was exactly what Mary wanted. The song mapped more than safe passage, it marked sanctuary, refuge, help for those who knew how to ask. Her voice rose higher, pure and clear as chapel bells. The courthouse square went still as people stopped to listen. "Shut her up," Pike told his men. But when they stepped close, Mary shifted into the harmony that had calmed the dogs. Low notes that seemed to come from the earth itself, high notes that touched the clouds. The men swayed, caught by the music's spell. "Now," Ephraim said. He moved fast for an old man, his knife finding the first companion's wrist before the fellow could draw his own blade. Silas threw himself sideways, pulling Pike off balance on the narrow path. The pistol fired wild, its ball splitting bark from a pine tree. Pike cursed and struggled to reload, but Silas had him now, one arm around the overseer's throat, the other reaching for the weapon. "Give it up, Pike," Silas gasped. "It's finished." But Pike wasn't finished. He had one more secret, one more card to play. "Girl's brother," he said. "Got him locked up in town. Touch me, and the boy disappears." Mary's song faltered. "You're lying. Ask your friend Ephraim. He knows where children go when they disappear from estates." The old man's face went grey. Pike was telling truth, at least, about having the power to make people vanish. "Let us pass," Pike said, shrugging free of Silas's grip. "All of us walk away, and the boy lives. Try to testify against me, and he's sold south before the words leave your mouth." Mary looked down at the courthouse square, so close now they could see individual faces turned up toward her song. Justice waited below, but her brother's life hung in Pike's hands. The choice was hers to make. "I'll go with you," Mary said. "Let Judge Silas testify about the will. But I'll go quiet, and you leave my brother be." Pike's smile came back, cold as winter ice. "Smart child. Knows when she's beaten." But Ephraim was studying the path ahead with old eyes that had seen much and forgotten little. "Trail splits here," he said. "2 ways down to town." Mary followed his gaze and saw it too, a narrow fork she'd missed in her worry over her brother. The main path continued its switchback descent, but a second trail cut straight down through loose scree and fallen timber. Dangerous, nearly impossible in wet conditions. But direct. "Left path goes to the courthouse," she said. "Right path goes to the jail." Pike looked between the 2 routes, calculating odds and distances. "We all take the left path. Together. Might be a problem with that." Ephraim pointed toward the valley. Dogs found the trail again. The patrol was coming up the ridge now, having sorted out Mary's musical misdirection. Their barks echoed closer with each minute. "How long till they reach us?" Silas asked. 10 minutes, Pike said with satisfaction. Maybe less. But Mary was humming again, not the root song this time, but something else. The chapel hymn her mother used to sing, the one that settled storms and calmed frightened animals. The one that made hard choices seemed clear. "I take the right path alone," she said. "Lead the dogs away from your group. You take the will to the courthouse and speak for my brother." "Too dangerous," Silas protested. "That path's barely passable in good weather." "Child knows paths," Ephraim said quiet. "Knows them better than any of us." Pike was thinking fast now, trying to see the trap. But there was no trap, just a girl choosing to save her brother's life at the cost of her own freedom. "Dogs'll follow your scent," Pike said. "Lead them right to you." "Dogs follow the song," Miri corrected. "I'll give them something to chase." She stepped toward the dangerous right path, her bare feet sure on the loose stone. The blue ribbon caught morning light, bright as hope. "Tell the judge what you found," she called to Silas. "Tell him about the grandmother's will and Pike's forged papers. Tell him a child can read county seals better than grown men." "Miri," Silas started. But she was already moving, her voice rising in the hymn that had guided them through storm and flood and the dark places where truth hides from the light. The dogs heard her song and turned away from the main group, baying as they followed the sweet, impossible voice that promised chase and capture. Pike cursed and started after her, but Ephraim's knife blocked his path. "Let her go," the old man said. "Child's buying us passage with her freedom. Don't waste the gift." Below them, the courthouse bell began to toll. 9 o'clock. Court was in session. Time to testify. The scree path dropped like a waterfall of broken stone, each step threatening to become an avalanche. Miri picked her way down with infinite care, her song guiding both her feet and the pursuit behind her. The dogs came hard, their voices rising in excitement as the scent trail grew fresh. But they were valley dogs, bred for flat ground and easy running. The loose stone and steep angles confused them. Miri's voice confused them more. She wove the hymn through the morning air like a silver thread, now close, now distant, always just out of reach. The dogs followed the sound rather than the scent, chasing echoes that bounced off stone and pine. Their handlers cursed and slipped on the treacherous footing. "Spread out," one of them called. "Cut her off at the bottom." But the bottom was still half a mile below, and the path grew more dangerous with each step. Miri sang louder, drawing them deeper into terrain that favored the hunted over the hunters. Behind her, she could hear the main group taking the safe path toward the courthouse. Silas's voice carrying orders, Ephraim's steady responses, even Pike's sullen complaints as he was forced to witness against his own interests. The will was safe. The testimony would be heard. Now all that remained was reaching her brother before Pike's Confederates could spirit him away. The jail sat at the bottom of the ridge, a stone building with barred windows that had held runaway slaves and circuit court prisoners for 50 years. Getting inside would be the easy part. Getting out with her brother might be impossible. Miri sang her way down the last 100 yards of scree, her voice echoing off the jail's stone walls. The building looked deserted, but smoke rose from its chimney. Someone was home. She paused at the edge of the woods, studying the layout. One door, facing the street. 2 windows, both barred. A small exercise yard enclosed by high stone walls, and there pressed against the yard's gate a small face she knew better than her own. Her brother Marcus, age 4, still in the clothes he'd worn to the courthouse gala. His eyes went wide when he saw her. "Miri," he called, his voice thin with relief. She put a finger to her lips, then began humming the lullaby that had always calmed his fears. His small hands gripped the gate bars, but he stayed quiet. The jail door opened. A heavy man stepped out, keys jingling on his belt. "Thought I heard something," he muttered, scanning the woods. Miri held perfectly still, her song drifting like wind through the trees. The man's eyes passed over her hiding spot without seeing, but the dogs were getting closer. Their bays echoed from the ridge as they worked their way down the scree path. Time was running short. The jailer went back inside, leaving the door unlocked. Careless, but understandable who would break into a jail. Miri crept toward the exercise yard, her song shifting to match the rhythm of her brother's frightened breathing. Slow it down, steady it out, make the fear smaller than the hope. The gate lock was simple iron, designed to keep children in rather than determined rescuers out. Miri had watched Ephraim work with metal often enough to know the basics. A thin piece of wire, gentle pressure, feel for the catch that wanted to give way. The lock clicked open. Marcus tumbled into her arms, his small body shaking with relief. "Thought they took you?" he whispered against her neck. "Never," she whispered back. "Now we run." But as they turned to flee, the jail door opened again. This time, the jailer wasn't alone. 3 men stepped out, rough types, who looked like they'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Well, the largest one said, "Little bird comes home to roost." The dog's baying grew louder on the ridge above. Between pursuit and capture, Mary found herself trapped. But the hymn road had one more verse to sing. The courthouse steps buzzed with morning business lawyers carrying leather cases, clerks sorting documents, townspeople drawn by word of unusual proceedings. The flood had delayed normal court sessions, but emergency hearings would proceed as scheduled. Judge Silas Whitaker climbed the steps slowly, his breathing still careful from the night's exertions. Ephraim flanked him, the grandmother's will tucked safe inside his coat. Behind them, Pike's men prodded Pike forward with sullen resignation. The probate judge, a thin man named Crawford with steel spectacles and patient eyes, waited on the courthouse portico. "Judge Whitaker," he nodded. "I understand you have urgent business. Emergency motion to examine a recently discovered document." Silas's voice carried across the gathering crowd. "Concerns the manumission of enslaved persons under the Harrow estate." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Manumission cases were rare, controversial, and always drew spectators. "The document in question?" Judge Crawford asked. Ephraim stepped forward and withdrew the aged paper from his coat. The morning light caught the faded brown ink, the careful script, the blue thread still clinging to its edges. "Last will and testament of Margaret Harrow, deceased. Hidden in a family quilt and discovered only last night." Judge Crawford examined the document with careful attention. His spectacles caught the light as he read. "Appears authentic," he said finally. "Paper, ink, and handwriting consistent with the period. Where was this found?" "Sewn into the binding of a chapel quilt," Silas replied. "The child Miriam discovered it." "And where is this child now?" Pike spoke up from behind his captors. "Led patrol dogs away from our group, probably captured by now." The judge's eyebrows climbed. "Captured? By whom?" "Slave patrol," Pike said. "Lawful pursuit of fugitive property. Property which, according to this will, should have been freed upon the patriarch's death." Judge Crawford's voice carried steel now. "When did Jeremiah Harrow pass?" "Last spring," Ephraim answered. "Debt's been mounting since." "Then the manumission condition has been met." The judge looked around the gathered crowd. "Where is the child's master of record?" "That would be me," Silas said, "though I contest the validity of any ownership claim. And I contest the validity of that will," Pike called out. "Forged document, planted to defraud legitimate creditors." Judge Crawford studied Pike with cold eyes. "You seem very certain about forgery, Mr. Pike. Perhaps you'd care to explain your expertise in document authentication?" Pike's face flushed. "Common sense. Convenient how that paper turned up just when the girl needed." "Convenient, perhaps, but is it false?" The judge gestured toward the courthouse door. "Shall we examine the evidence in proper proceeding?" The crowd pressed closer as they moved inside. The courtroom filled quickly, word of the unusual case spreading through the flood-delayed town like water finding level ground. But as testimony began, one voice remained absent, the voice of the child whose freedom hung in the balance. The jail exercise yard felt smaller with 4 men and 2 children crowded inside its stone walls. The largest captor, a man called Briggs, kept his rifle trained on Mary while his companion secured the gate. "Thought you were clever, leading those dogs on a dance," Briggs said. "But dogs ain't the only ones who can track." Marcus clung to Mary's hand, his small fingers tight with fear. She hummed soft under her breath, the calming lullaby that had always worked before. "Stop that noise," Briggs snapped. "Save your singing for the auction block." "What auction block?" Mary asked. "Pike's got buyers lined up." "You and your brother bring good money in the New Orleans market." Briggs smiled without warmth. "Long way from county courts and legal papers." Above them on the ridge, the patrol dogs had given up their chase. The handlers' voices faded as they returned to town. Their quarry seemingly vanished into the morning mist. But the silence felt wrong, too complete, like the pause before thunder. "Where's Pike?" one of the other men asked. Briggs shrugged. "Handling the legal end. Judge'll dismiss any claims about freedom papers and we'll have clean bills of sale by noon. And if he don't, then we disappear these children before any paperwork gets filed. Briggs checked his rifle's priming. Either way, they don't see another sunset in this county. Mary felt Marcus shiver against her side, but instead of fear, she felt something else rising in her chest. The same feeling she'd had when tuning the pewter cups, the sense that every note had its proper place, that harmony was possible, even in chaos. "Can I sing one song?" she asked. "For my brother?" "Something Mother used to sing?" Briggs considered. "One song, then quiet." Mary began the lullaby, her voice soft and clear in the stone-walled yard. Marcus relaxed against her, his breathing slowing to match the gentle rhythm. But the song wasn't just for her brother, it was for anyone who might be listening. Anyone who might recognize the melody and understand its message, anyone who might still be close enough to help. The courtroom testimony had reached its crucial point. Sella, the midwife, stood at the witness rail, her weathered hands steady on the Bible as she swore her oath. "State your relationship to the deceased, Mrs. Parsons," Judge Crawford instructed. "Helped Margaret Harrow birth 3 children and lay out 2. Attended her final illness and witnessed her last testament." Sella's voice carried clear through the packed courtroom. "The document in question, did you see it created?" "Saw her write it in her own hand. Watched her sew it into the quilt binding. Said she wanted to make sure her conscience debt got paid, even if her family couldn't see fit to honor it willing." Murmurs swept the courtroom. Pike's face had gone pale, but he kept silent on his lawyer's advice. "And you're certain the handwriting is authentic?" the judge pressed. "Certain as I am of my own name." Margaret Harrow had distinctive script, learned it from convent sisters before her marriage. Slanted left, never right. Small loops on the G letters. "This will shows every mark I remember." Judge Crawford examined the document again, comparing it to other samples from the county records. The handwriting matched perfectly. "The court finds sufficient evidence of authenticity," he announced. "However, questions remain about the document's legal standing and the current status of the children in question." Dr. Hart stood up from the gallery. "Your Honor, I can speak to the child's character and capabilities." "Proceed, Doctor." "Last night, the girl Miriam demonstrated knowledge of medicinal remedies that saved Judge Whitaker's life. Her understanding of Latin pharmaceutical terms exceeded that of many trained physicians." "Relevance, Doctor." "A child of such intelligence and learning hardly fits the legal definition of property in any moral sense. Her grandmother's will simply acknowledged what nature had already declared." More murmurs from the crowd. Judge Crawford called for order. "Nevertheless, the law is clear about the legal status of enslaved persons, regardless of their individual qualities." The judge's voice carried regret. "The question before this court is whether the will's manumission clause has legal force, not whether slavery itself is just." Pike's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client maintains that the entire document is fraudulent, planted by abolition sympathizers to—" He was interrupted by a clear, sweet voice floating through the courthouse windows. A child's lullaby, sung with perfect pitch and infinite sadness. "That's her," Ephraim said, standing. "That's Mary's voice." Judge Crawford paused, listening to the distant song. "Where is that coming from?" Silas moved to the window. "The jail. Someone's got her at the jail." The courtroom erupted in noise, questions, accusations, demands for explanation. Through it all, the child's voice continued, steady as hope and twice as pure. "Court will recess for 1 hour," Judge Crawford announced over the chaos. "Sheriff, I want that child brought here immediately for questioning." "Sheriff's out with the flood patrol," a deputy called from the back. "Won't return till evening." The judge's face darkened. "Then I'll go myself. A child's testimony may be inadmissible in most cases, but when her freedom depends on her own words, she has a right to speak." The lullaby drifted across the flooded town like morning mist, touching every ear and stirring every heart that remembered childhood's simple grace. In the courthouse, lawyers paused their arguments. In the shops, merchants looked up from their ledgers. Even the patrol dogs, resting from their failed chase, lifted their heads and tilted them toward the sound. Judge Crawford led the procession down the courthouse steps, a strange parade of lawyers, witnesses, and townspeople, drawn by the impossible purity of a child's voice. Pike's face had gone white as bone. "This is irregular. Witnesses can't be examined outside proper proceedings. These are hardly proper circumstances, Judge Crawford replied. Emergency court sessions allow for emergency procedures. The jail sat a quarter-mile from the courthouse square, separated by mud-slicked streets and standing water from the night storm, but the song carried clear across the distance, growing stronger as they approached. Dr. Hart walked beside Ephraim, his medical bag bouncing against his hip. Child's been singing for 20 minutes straight. Either she's got the strongest lungs in the county, or she's pacing herself for endurance. Pacing herself, Ephraim said with certainty. Girl knows songs like other children know games. Could sing all day if needed. Judge Silas moved carefully on the slick cobblestones, his breathing easier but still cautious. Question is, what's she singing for? Comfort? Distraction? Or signal? Seller finished. Same as the root songs and the chapel hymns. Girls sending a message. They rounded the corner and saw the jail, a squat stone building that had housed criminals and runaway slaves for 3 generations. The exercise yard gate stood closed, but through its bars they could see Mary and Marcus huddled against the far wall. 3 armed men stood guard. The largest one, Briggs, looked up as the procession approached. Court business, he called out. Keep moving. Judge Crawford stepped forward, his black robes marking his authority. I am the probate judge for this county, and I have questions for that child. Child's in protective custody, Briggs replied. By order of the proper authorities. Which authorities? Crawford's voice carried steel. The sheriff is absent, the marshals are handling flood relief, and I've issued no custody orders. Briggs's rifle shifted slightly. Authority of the property owners. Child's a runaway slave, being held for return to lawful masters. The child's legal status is currently under review by this court. Crawford moved closer to the gate. She cannot be held without proper documentation. Got documentation. Briggs pulled a folded paper from his coat. Signed and sealed. But when Judge Crawford examined the document, his trained eye caught what Mary had seen from the beginning, the wrong wax color, the serif marks that didn't match county standards, the subtle irregularities that marked a skilled forgery. This seal is counterfeit, Crawford announced to the crowd. The document has no legal standing. Briggs stepped back, his rifle coming up. Legal standing ain't what matters here. Then what does matter? Silas asked, moving to stand beside the judge. Briggs's smile showed teeth like a steel trap. Money, and the people who pay it. The child's lullaby continued from beyond the bars, unchanged and unchanging. But now her voice carried something new, a subtle harmony, as if other voices were joining her song. Marcus had begun to hum along, his small voice threading through his sister's melody like silver wire through silk. Brother and sister, singing together in the face of impossible odds. The crowd grew silent, listening to the pure sound of innocence refusing to be broken. Open that gate immediately. Judge Crawford's command carried the full weight of county authority. Briggs laughed harsh. Don't think so, Your Honor. Got my orders from higher up than county court. Higher than the law? Seller called from the crowd. What authority supersedes legal process? Money authority. Briggs gestured toward the courthouse with his rifle. Rich folks want these children gone. They get gone. Simple as that. Pike pushed forward from the back of the group. Judge Crawford, these men are acting without my knowledge or consent. Like hell we are, Briggs snarled. Got your signed orders right here. He pulled out another document. Says, to secure the children for transport south, by any means necessary. Pike's face went red. That document's not. Not what? Crawford examined the paper. Not yours. The signature certainly appears to match your other correspondence. The trap was closing around Pike now. Documents he'd thought safely hidden were surfacing like debris after a flood. Lies he'd carefully constructed were unraveling in broad daylight. Child singing again, Ephraim observed. Mary's voice had shifted to a new melody, the chapel hymn that had guided them through storm and flood. But this time, she wasn't singing alone. From the courthouse square came answering voices. Townspeople who'd been touched by the child's perfect pitch the night before. Lawyers who'd paused their arguments to listen. Even some of the shopkeepers and laborers who'd heard her lullaby on the morning air. Black voices and white voices weaving together in harmony that transcended legal documents and property law. Whole towns singing, Dr. Hart marveled. Whole town's listening, Seller corrected, listening to what that child's been trying to tell them all along. Judge Crawford called for silence. Mr. Briggs, I order you to open that gate and release those children to proper custody. And if I refuse? Crawford looked around at the crowd, 50 townspeople, all watching, all waiting to see if law would triumph over lawlessness. Then you'll answer to them, he said simply. Briggs looked at the faces surrounding him. Angry faces, determined faces, people who'd been moved by a child's song and wouldn't stand by while she was stolen away. Hell, he muttered, and reached for his keys. But Pike wasn't finished. Not yet. That will is still a forgery, Pike shouted as Briggs fumbled with the gate lock. I can prove it. Judge Crawford turned. Proceed. Pike pulled out a leather portfolio. Got the real Margaret Harrow will right here. Filed with the county clerk 3 years ago. No mention of manumission for any slaves. The crowd pressed closer as Pike spread the document on a wooden crate. Heavy paper, official seals, impressive signatures, everything looked authentic. Clerk's seal, Pike pointed to the red wax. Filed and registered proper, but Mary's voice cut through the legal arguments like a blade through silk. Not singing now, but speaking clear and certain from behind the exercise yard bars. Wax is wrong color for 3 years ago. Pike's face twisted. Child don't know what she's talking about. Child knows county seals better than most lawyers, Ephraim said. Tell them, girl. Mary's small hands gripped the gate bars. County changed wax suppliers last year. Old wax was brown, new wax is red. That document shows red wax but claims 3-year filing date. Judge Crawford examined the seal with his magnifying glass. Child's correct. Red wax is recent batch. Brown wax was standard for older documents. Furthermore, Mary continued, serif marks on the county crest changed 18 months ago. Clean lines replaced decorative marks. That seal shows old decorative style on new wax. The crowd murmured with understanding. Even people who couldn't read legal documents could follow the child's clear logic. Seal's been lifted from an old document and transferred to new paper, Dr. Hart observed. Crude forgery, when you know what to look for. Pike's face had gone from red to white to grey. That's impossible. Child can't know all that. Child learned from watching county business, Silas said. Same way she learned plant medicine and perfect pitch. Knowledge passes down, generation to generation. Judge Crawford handed the forged will back to Pike. Mr. Pike, you've presented fraudulent documents to this court. That's a felony under state law. Now wait furthermore, you've conspired to kidnap free persons assuming the grandmother's will proves authentic. That will's fake too. But the crowd had heard enough. 50 voices rose in angry protest. Even Briggs stepped away from Pike, wanting no part of whatever came next. Open the gate, Crawford ordered again. This time, Briggs didn't hesitate. The exercise yard gate swung open on hinges that squealed like rusty conscience. Mary stepped through first, her brother's hand tight in hers, their voices still carrying the chapel hymn that had sustained them through the long morning. Judge Crawford knelt before them, his black robes pooling in the mud. Child, do you understand what's happening here? Yes, sir. Mary's voice stayed steady despite everything. Grandmother's will says we should be free. Mr. Pike says it's not legal. You got to decide who's telling truth. And what do you believe? Mary looked at the crowd gathered around them, townspeople who'd been moved by her song, lawyers who'd paused their arguments to listen, even some of Pike's men who looked ashamed of their morning's work. I believe truth has a way of surfacing, she said, like water finding level ground. Can't stay buried forever. Crawford smiled. Wise words. Now, about this will, can you tell me exactly how you found it? Mary described the quilt binding, the hidden papers, the careful stitching that had preserved her grandmother's final wishes for 20 years. Her account matched Seller's testimony perfectly, and the seal irregularities you've noted. Been watching county business since I was small. Mother taught me to pay attention to official marks and such. Knowledge might be useful someday, she said. Indeed it was. Crawford stood and addressed the crowd. Based on the evidence presented, including this child's expert testimony regarding document authentication, this court finds the grandmother's will to be genuine and legally binding. Cheers rose from the gathered townspeople. Even the patrol dogs, resting in the shade, seemed to wag approval. Therefore, by the authority vested in me by the state of Virginia, I hereby order the immediate manumission of the children Miriam and Marcus, as provided in the last will and testament of Margaret Harrow. The clerk, who'd arrived late and flustered from flood duty, began writing furiously. Official papers, legal seals, the machinery of justice finally grinding forward. Furthermore, Crawford continued, I order the arrest of Elias Pike on charges of document fraud, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and attempted theft of free persons. Pike tried to run, made it 3 steps before Ephraim's outstretched foot sent him sprawling in the mud. Court's not dismissed yet, the old man said mildly. The courthouse steps at noon blazed with autumn sunlight. The morning's flood mist finally burned away. The formal documents were signed and sealed. Now, manumission papers, wages for past service, charges filed against Pike and his confederates. Judge Silas Whitaker sat on the courthouse bench, his breathing easy for the first time in months. The strain that had been killing him, debts, threats, impossible choices, had lifted like morning fog. What happens now? Mary asked. Silas pulled the signet ring from his finger, the ring that had marked his authority as master of plantation and slaves. For a moment he studied it, then set it on the bench beside him. Ring stays here, he said. Symbol of old ways, old mistakes. New household operates on different principles. What principles? Fair wages for fair work, education for those who want it, choice for those ready to choose. Silas smiled. Turns out freedom's profitable in ways I never considered. Dr. Hart approached from the courthouse door, his medical bag in one hand and a small bottle in the other. Lobelia tonic, he told Mary, measured and labeled proper, for Judge Silas's breathing troubles. Thank you, sir. Mary accepted the bottle carefully. Though I suspect his breathing will improve now that the weight's lifted. From his conscience? Hart asked. From his lungs, Mary replied. Fear and guilt make poor medicine. Hope and clear air work better. Sella joined them on the steps, her herb satchel swinging at her side. Child's got more healing wisdom than most doctors I know. Learned from the best teachers, Mary said, touching her blue ribbon. Mother and grandmother both. The ribbon caught sunlight, bright as hope and twice as enduring. Ephraim came last, leading 2 horses and a pack mule. Wagons ready for those who want to travel. Stay or go, choice is yours now. Mary looked at her brother, then at the courthouse where their freedom had been declared, then at the people who'd stood witness to justice, finally done. Where would we go? North, Ephraim said. Got family in Pennsylvania. Preacher Cole knows the routes. West, Silas suggested. Homestead land available for those with papers and determination. Or stay, Sella added. Town could use a child who knows medicine and music both. Mary considered the options. Stay in familiar surroundings with familiar faces. Travel to unknown places with uncertain futures. Each path carried its own risks and rewards. But before she could answer, church bells began ringing across the town. Not the hour chime this time, but the Sunday call to worship. Even though it was Monday, the sound seemed appropriate. First things first, Mary said. We thank the people who helped. We light a lamp for those still waiting for freedom. We sing the chapel hymn one more time. And then, Mary smiled, her voice carrying the certainty of perfect pitch and unshakable faith. Then we follow the road wherever it leads. Epilogue evening found them at the chapel where their journey had truly begun, the small white building where Pike's schemes had unraveled and truth had emerged from quilted hiding places. Preacher Cole had lit the chapel lamps early, their golden light spilling from every window. The building glowed like a lantern itself, visible for miles across the valley. Mary stood on the chapel porch, her brother beside her, watching townspeople arrive for the impromptu service of Thanksgiving. Black faces and white faces, former slaves and former masters, all drawn by the promise of music that transcended legal boundaries. Light, the hanging lamp. Preacher Cole called from the doorway. Signal to travelers that sanctuary waits here. Mary climbed onto the porch rail and hung a lantern next to the chapel bell. Her blue ribbon fluttered in the evening breeze, bright against the dark wood. Then she began to sing. Not the root song this time, nor the chapel hymn, but something new. a melody that spoke of journeys beginning rather than ending, of freedom earned and justice witnessed, of children who knew their worth and adults who'd remembered their conscience. Other voices joined her, tentative at first, then stronger. Harmony layered on harmony until the small chapel could barely contain the sound. Down in the valley, the patrol dogs had gone silent. Even the river seemed to quiet its eternal murmur, listening to the music that promised better days ahead. Judge Silas Whitaker sat on the chapel steps, his signet ring forgotten on the courthouse bench, his breathing clear and steady for the first time in memory. Beside him, Ephraim hummed harmony, while Sella sorted herbs by lamplight. The past had been settled, the future waited to be written. And somewhere between memory and hope, a child's perfect pitch showed them all the way forward. The lantern burned steady against the coming road.